A peaceful sunset hike turns into a nightmare when a pregnant woman is shoved off a cliff by her husband's mistress, while the husband himself stands at the edge watching with a cold and chilling stare. They believe she will fall, disappear, and never return. But what they don't know is that on a nearby ridge, a lone mountaineer witnesses everything and is ready to risk his life to pull her back from the brink and expose the truth they tried to bury. What follows is a journey of survival, justice, and powerful rebirth. And trust me, the moment she returns 6 months later will shake an entire city to its core. Tell us what time you're listening and where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Emily Carter rested a hand on her swollen belly as the car rolled to a stop near the overlook at Red Canyon, Colorado. The sky was turning gold, soft and warm, in a way that made the steep cliffs look almost gentle. She tried to take it as a sign. 6 months pregnant and exhausted from weeks of icy silence between her and her husband, she wanted to believe this outing meant something. Ryan had said they needed fresh air. He had said they needed time alone to remember that they were still a family. Emily chose to trust him. She always had. She stepped out carefully, breathing in the thin mountain air. Her boots crunched over the gravel as she followed Ryan onto a narrow trail that wound toward the cliff's edge. The Colorado wind tugged at her light jacket, and the faint smell of pine drifted up from the canyon below. For a brief moment, she felt calm. She wanted to believe Ryan had finally softened again. He walked ahead of her with quick steps, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His shoulders were tight, and his jaw moved slightly as if he were grinding his teeth. Emily watched him for several seconds and tried to convince herself that he was cold or stressed from work. But something in the way he kept glancing over his shoulder made a small warning bell ring inside her chest. She touched her belly again. "It's fine," she whispered to her baby, though she did not entirely believe it. "Mommy and Daddy just need to talk." Ryan stopped suddenly. Emily slowed to match his pace, waiting for him to say something. Before she could ask what was wrong, a voice drifted up from behind them. "What a coincidence running into you two up here." Emily stiffened. She turned and saw Sierra Quinn approaching with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. Sierra was dressed in fitted hiking clothes that looked more like an advertisement than gear worn for real trails. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. Emily's stomach tightened. Sierra was supposed to be just a colleague. She was supposed to be someone Ryan barely talked to outside of work. Emily had tried not to question the late-night texts or the perfume she smelled on Ryan's clothes. She had tried not to let jealousy overshadow her reason. But seeing Sierra here, in a remote canyon at sunset, made every fear sharpen into something painful and undeniable. Emily forced herself to speak calmly. "Sierra, what are you doing here?" "Oh, you know," Sierra answered lightly, stepping closer. "Needed some fresh air. Thought I'd hike a bit before dinner in the city. Didn't expect to see you both." Her gaze drifted to Emily's belly for a moment, lingering in a way that felt cruel before sliding back up to her face. Ryan said nothing. He stood with his arms crossed, looking past both women toward the horizon, as if waiting for something. The wind picked up. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "We should head back soon," she said, trying to sound steady. Sierra tilted her head and walked around her, moving with slow, deliberate steps. "You look tired, Emily. Maybe the trail is too much for you." Her tone was sweet, but the smirk tugging at her mouth twisted it into something mocking. She stepped closer to the edge of the cliff and motioned for Emily to join her. "Come here! You should see the view! It's breathtaking!" "Oh." Emily hesitated. Something in her body screamed danger. Still, she moved forward one careful step at a time. She did not want to appear paranoid. She did not want Ryan to accuse her of overreacting again. When she reached the edge, she kept a safe distance, letting her eyes drift over the canyon. The sun had fallen low behind the distant mountains. Light scattered across the red rocks like fire. Sierra leaned in closer and whispered near her ear, "You know, some people really shouldn't be mothers. Some people hold others back." Emily's breath hitched. She tried to step away, but Sierra's hand touched her arm. Not firm, just cold. "Sierra, stop," Emily said softly. "I don't want to fight." "I'm not fighting," Sierra murmured. "I'm just finishing something." Before Emily could understand what she meant, Sierra shoved her with sudden force. Emily's body lurched forward. The world tilted. Her boots scraped against the rock as she tried to catch herself. Her hands grabbed wildly at open air, until one palm found a jagged branch jutting from the cliff face. Pain shot through her shoulder as her full weight yanked against her grip. Her scream tore through the canyon. "Ryan!" she shouted. "Help me, please help!" Her legs dangled above open emptiness. The fall beneath her stretched hundreds of feet down into shadows. Her fingers burned as they tightened around the branch. Splinters bit into her skin. She gasped, fighting to breathe. Above her, Sierra stepped back and smoothed her hair as if nothing had happened. Ryan stood a few feet away. His face was empty. No shock, no fear, just a chilling calm that froze Emily's blood. He did not move toward her. He did not shout for help. He simply stared, the fading sunlight catching in his eyes and turning them into something hard. Emily's voice shook. "Ryan, please, I'm carrying your child." He blinked but did not come closer. Emily's heart hammered violently as her fingers slipped a fraction of an inch. Dirt crumbled under her nails. She risked a glance down and instantly regretted it. Her vision blurred. Her stomach twisted. Her grip weakened. A gust of wind rushed upward from the canyon floor, and the long scarf around Emily's neck tore free. She watched it float upward, twisting in the air before disappearing over the ledge behind her. It was the last thing she saw before fear drowned everything else. Her voice cracked. "Somebody, anybody, please." Then, through the pounding in her ears, she heard something new. The faint crunch of footsteps on gravel, slow at first, then faster. Someone was coming down the trail, someone close, someone who might reach her in time. And the footsteps grew louder, urgent and steady, cutting through the roar of the wind. The wind rushed against the canyon walls as Jack Morrison moved steadily along the trail, his boots scraping lightly over the gravel. He had climbed these paths for more than 20 years, long enough to recognize when something felt wrong in the air. Moments earlier he had noticed a strip of fabric fluttering violently on a lower rock. Now as he stepped closer, the truth of it became clear. A torn scarf, pale blue and caught on a jagged edge, snapped against the wind. It did not belong there. Jack felt a sharp jolt of alarm shoot through him. He crouched, reached out, and tugged the scarf free. The cloth was ripped, as if torn from someone who had been pulled or pushed. He scanned the cliff beneath him. The canyon was deep, its drop brutal and unforgiving. At first he saw nothing but red stone and shadows. Then a faint cry rose from below. A woman's voice, weak and trembling. Jack stood instantly. Training and instinct fused into a single urgency. He pulled the coil of rope from his pack, looped it around his waist, and secured the knot with practiced speed. His hands moved with precision born from years of mountain rescues. He dug his heels into the ground and tossed the extra rope back toward the trail. A silent prayer formed in his chest as he lowered himself over the edge. The rock was rough beneath his gloves. Dust crumbled with every shift of his weight. The wind slapped against him as he descended foot by foot. The voice rose again, sharper this time. He leaned his body slightly to the left, and then he finally saw her. Emily was hanging from a single branch that erupted from the cliff face like a twisted arm. Her body shook uncontrollably. Her face was ghost pale, lips trembling as she struggled to breathe. One hand clung to the branch, while the other hung limp by her side. Her legs dangled uselessly above the abyss. She was slipping. "Hang on! I'm coming!" Jack called out, his voice steady even as his heart hammered. Emily lifted her head, her eyes wide with terror. I can't hold on!" she gasped. Her fingers trembled violently. Her entire body sagged as if the last of her strength had drained away. Jack lowered himself faster. Pebbles rained down the canyon as he moved. When he reached her level, he braced himself with one foot wedged into the rock and leaned toward her, stretching his arm as far as it would go. "Take my hand," he said, his voice controlled and calm. "I've got you." Her grip slipped another inch, her nails scraped along the branch. A broken whimper escaped her throat. Just as her fingers peeled away, Jack lunged forward and closed his hand firmly around her wrist. Emily cried out as the movement jolted her body, but she did not let go. Jack tightened his grip and pulled her closer. Her breathing was frantic and shallow. She leaned her head back, eyes squeezing shut. She whispered something. At first he could not hear it clearly. Then her voice fractured into the air. "My husband wanted me gone." Jack froze for only the smallest moment. The shock hit him hard, but he shoved it aside. This was not the time. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Focus on me. Don't look down." He shifted his position and looped the rope around her torso with careful precision. When he felt the knot tighten securely, he anchored his weight against the rock and signaled up the rope with 2 sharp tugs. A long moment passed. Then the rope tightened from above. His partners on higher ground began pulling. Emily's head fell forward. Her breaths came in short, sharp gasps. As they rose slowly up the cliffside, her body pressed against his. He could feel how cold she was. Her skin was clammy, and her muscles trembled uncontrollably. Halfway up, she clutched her belly as a violent spasm tore through her. Jack looked down at her in alarm. "Easy. Breathe through it," he urged. Her fingers dug into her own jacket as if trying to hold the pain still. Her eyes rolled slightly from dizziness. "Stay with me. We're almost there." Another few feet. The ground grew nearer. Jack's arms burned with strain as he lifted her weight and kept her close. When they finally reached the top, Jack pulled her fully into his arms before anyone else could move in. Her legs gave out the moment her feet touched the ground. He lowered her gently onto the dirt. Her chest heaved. Her skin, already pale, had turned a faint gray. She looked fragile in a way that sent a deep shock through him. He could not even imagine how long she had been clinging to that branch. He grabbed his jacket, slid it off, and wrapped it around her shoulders, pulling the fabric tightly to trap whatever warmth he could. Emily stared up at him with glassy eyes. Her lips moved without sound as she reached for his wrist. Her grip was so weak that it barely felt like pressure, yet she held on as if her life depended on it. Her voice came out as a faint whisper. "Don't leave me." "I won't," Jack replied. His voice was low and certain. "You're safe. Help is on the way." No, he squeezed her hand gently, letting her know she was not alone. But her consciousness was slipping fast. Her eyelids fluttered. Her breathing weakened. Her head leaned against his shoulder, and her fingers loosened. Panic flickered inside him, but he forced himself to remain calm. He placed a hand on her cheek, trying to keep her awake. "Stay with me," he said again. "You're stronger than this." In the next moment, a powerful sound rose from the distance. A deep, rhythmic thumping filled the air and echoed through the canyon. The ground vibrated. Dust swirled upward in spirals. The roar grew louder, beating against Jack's ears. Emily's eyes flickered open for a brief second as a bright white light swept across the ridge and illuminated her pale face. The rescue helicopter had arrived. Ryan Hale sat before the studio lights with the posture of a man who had spent years perfecting his public image. The cameras blinked red as the live broadcast began, and he lowered his eyes with a sorrowful expression that looked carefully practiced. The reporter asked a gentle question about the tragedy at Red Canyon. Ryan inhaled slowly and spoke in a voice filled with controlled grief. "It was a tragic accident. My wife slipped. The trail was narrow. I did everything I could." His tone broke at the end, just enough to convince anyone who did not know him well. Outside the frame, Sierra Quinn watched the monitor. The moment the interviewer thanked Ryan for his courage, she rushed toward him, tears streaming dramatically down her cheeks. She wrapped her arms tightly around him and pressed her face against his shoulder. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Reporters whispered about how heartbreaking it was to see a man mourn the loss of his wife while being comforted by a close friend. Sierra sobbed loudly and whispered phrases about how Emily had been like a sister to her. The entire scene was carefully orchestrated, and neither of them seemed troubled by how fabricated it looked to anyone who truly paid attention. 2 days later, they stood together at a memorial service held in a small Denver chapel. White flowers lined the steps, and guests whispered condolences as if Emily had already been laid to rest. Sierra clung to Ryan again, crying so intensely that several attendees tried to console her. Ryan kept his head bowed, accepting sympathy with the practiced humility of a grieving widower. He did not mention the fact that Emily was still alive. He did not mention the fact that she was fighting for her life in an ICU bed only 20 miles away. Inside that hospital room, the world felt quieter. Machines hummed. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic. Emily's chest rose and fell with slow, shaky breaths. Her eyelashes fluttered as she drifted in and out of consciousness. When her eyes finally opened fully, the first thing she saw was the ceiling's dim glow. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Pain pulsed at the back of her skull, and her body felt heavy. Then she heard the television that someone had left on at a low volume. Her gaze drifted toward the small screen across the room. A reporter's voice filled the silence. In a heartbreaking turn, businessman Ryan Hale spoke today about the tragic loss of his wife, Emily Carter Hale, who fell during a hike at Red Canyon. The screen shifted to show Ryan dabbing his eyes, Sierra touching his arm, both dressed in black. Emily felt her heartbeat spike, the edges of her vision blurred. She forced herself upright with weak arms, staring in disbelief as they replayed the memorial service. Her husband's face, filled with false sorrow, filled the screen. Sierra beside him clutched a folded tissue. Photographs of Emily were displayed behind them as if she had already vanished from the world. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, shaking. "He is erasing me," she whispered. The realization settled like ice in her veins. Ryan was not simply lying. He was burying her alive. Outside the glass window of the ICU room, Jack Morrison stood quietly. He had not wanted to intrude, but he knew she would awaken soon. When he heard the faint, choked gasp from inside, he stepped forward and saw her staring at the television, hands trembling. Her lips moved silently as tears filled her eyes. Jack felt something harden in his chest. He reached for the door, but the doctor approached at that exact moment. "She should not be overwhelmed," the doctor said firmly. "No stress, no fear. Her condition is fragile, and she is still dehydrated. Emotional shock could be dangerous for both her and the baby." Jack nodded, but his jaw tightened slightly. He understood the medical reality, yet he could not ignore the emotional one. Emily was watching her life being rewritten while she lay helpless in a hospital bed. Inside the room, Emily fumbled for the remote with shaking fingers. She muted the television. Her breaths came unevenly. The doctor entered and checked her vitals. "Emily, please stay calm. You need rest. Your body is still recovering." But Emily heard nothing except the echo of Ryan's voice claiming she was dead. When she found the strength to speak, her words came out cracked. "They are planning my death certificate, aren't they?" The doctor hesitated. Emily saw that hesitation and panic surged inside her. "Tell me the truth," she pleaded. "They think I'm gone. He wants me gone." Her breaths quickened. A tremor ran through her body. The monitor beside her bed beeped faster. Jack stepped inside then, ignoring the doctor's warning look. He approached her slowly, hands open, his voice low and steady. "Emily, look at me. Breathe. You are here. You are alive." She stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. "They are telling the world I'm dead." Jack pulled the chair close and sat beside her. "Yes, they think you died in that fall." His expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp with determination. "But that gives us an advantage. They are not looking for you. They are not watching. That means you are safe for the moment." Emily shook her head weakly. "Ryan wants to be free of me, free of the baby." Her voice cracked on the last word as she placed a trembling hand on her belly. "He wanted me erased." "Then we will use that," Jack said gently. "Their lies are giving us time. Time to protect you and time to expose what they did." Emily closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her temples. Fear and realization blended into something painfully clear. Ryan had not simply abandoned her on that cliff. He had planned to live as though she had never existed. She whispered, "He really wants us gone." Jack nodded once. "But you are not gone." The room went quiet except for the hum of medical equipment. Then Emily heard a faint sound on her left. She turned her head slowly. The fetal monitor showed a soft, flickering pattern. A fragile heartbeat pulsed through the speaker. Weak, but steady. Her baby was still alive. The sound echoed in the dim room like a promise. Emily woke to the soft rustle of curtains and the gentle warmth of sunlight touching her face. For a moment, she thought she was still in the hospital. But the air smelled different. It carried the scent of pine, wood, and something faintly sweet like burning cedar. She opened her eyes slowly. She was lying in a wide bed covered with thick blankets. A stone fireplace glowed several feet away, filling the room with a steady, comforting warmth. The walls were made of polished timber, and tall windows framed snow-covered trees swaying outside. She pushed herself up, confused. Her last memory was the blur of lights from the rescue helicopter and Jack's voice urging her to stay awake. Now she was in a quiet, peaceful room that looked nothing like a medical facility. Her hand moved immediately to her stomach. Relief washed through her as she felt the faintest movement beneath her palm. Her baby was still alive, still holding on. The door creaked open and Jack stepped in, carrying a tray with warm tea and a folded blanket. He paused when he saw her awake. "Good. You're up," he said gently. "How do you feel?" Emily blinked at him, still trying to understand where she was. "Jack, where are we?" "Aspen," he answered, setting the tray beside her. "This is my cabin, off the main road. Private. Safe." "Safe from who?" Emily whispered, though she already knew the answer. "Safe from anyone looking for you," Jack replied calmly, "including the people who pushed you off that cliff or watched it happen." Emily gripped the blanket tightly. "So Ryan thinks I'm dead?" Jack nodded with a firm, serious gaze. "Yes, he announced it publicly." A hollow ache settled in her chest. She had expected betrayal, but she had not expected erasure. As if her life could simply be crossed out and rewritten without her consent. Jack pulled a chair closer to the bed. "You woke up in the ICU, but it was too dangerous to leave you there. Reporters were already asking questions about the rescue helicopter. Then the hospital saw a memorial announcement on the morning news. It didn't take long for them to connect the name." "Memorial?" Emily whispered. "He didn't even wait?" "No," Jack said. "He moved fast." Emily pressed a hand to her mouth as her throat tightened. She had imagined Ryan grieving her once, back when she still believed he loved her. Now the image of him standing before cameras pretending to mourn made her stomach twist with anger and shame. Jack watched her carefully. "I need you to understand something. I have dealt with many emergencies in the mountains, many victims, many families. But what happened to you wasn't an accident, and what happened after proves it." Emily looked up at him with wide, searching eyes. Jack took a slow breath. "Before I retired, I led the rescue division for the Rocky Mountain region. I spent years working with local police, federal teams, and private investigators. When I stepped back from active duty, I built Morrison Lodge. It started as a single cabin for hikers. Now it is a resort chain with cabins, lodges, and ski retreats across several counties." Emily stared at him, surprised. She had not known anything about his past until now. "So you're someone with influence." "Someone with connections," Jack corrected. "And someone who knows how to protect people who need it." He paused. "I have lawyers who can work quietly, investigators who owe me favors, officers in surrounding towns who know what I built and why I did it. If Ryan or Sierra tries to reach you, I will know before they're within 20 miles. Emily felt a tremor run through her. "Why would you do all that for me?" Jack set his elbows on his knees and looked at her with steady, sincere eyes. "Because you fought to live. Because when you were hanging over that cliff, you held on even when your body was failing. I'm not letting someone erase a person who fought that hard." Emily swallowed hard. Her eyes grew wet again. "Everyone thinks I'm gone." Jack nodded, and then reached into his jacket. "I'm afraid this part will hurt, but you need to see it." He unfolded a newspaper and placed it gently in her hands. Her breath stopped. On the front page was her photograph, a smiling image from better years. Beneath it were the words, "In loving memory," in thick black print. The article below described her tragic fall and devastated husband. It spoke of a memorial service held the previous evening. It painted her as a woman already buried. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Tears slipped down her face silently. "I don't exist anymore," she whispered. He made sure of it. Jack leaned closer. "Emily, look at me." She forced herself to lift her gaze. "You are alive," Jack said firmly, "and you have a child who needs you. They wanted to erase you. Instead, they created an opportunity. If they think you're gone, you have the time and space to heal, and the time to decide what comes next." Emily wiped her cheeks, but the tears kept falling. "I was nothing to them. Not even to him. He just wanted to be free." Jack's voice softened. "A man like that fears accountability more than anything else, but you will not face him alone." She looked around the warm wooden room again, then back at Jack's steady presence. Something inside her steadied. Her breaths became deeper. Her shoulders dropped slightly from their tense position. "I want to stay alive," she said quietly. "Not just survive. I want to live. For my baby. For the truth." "That is the first step," Jack replied with a nod. "There is something more I need to show you." He stood, walked toward a door in the corner, and pulled out a small key. Emily watched, her pulse rising with curiosity. The door creaked as he pushed it open. He flicked on the lights. Bright white bulbs illuminated a large storage room lined with shelves and metal cabinets. Thick binders, organized folders, maps, and photographed evidence filled the space. Dozens of investigation files sat waiting. Jack stepped aside and let her see everything clearly. "Investigation files," he said quietly, "all waiting for you." The truth had just begun. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Jack's cabin, casting stripes across the wooden floor. Emily sat curled on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. She sipped warm tea as she waited for the day's news to unfold. She had barely slept. Her mind stayed alive through the night with thoughts of Ryan's lies and Sierra's cruelty. When Jack switched on the television, the first broadcast of the morning began with a familiar face and a chilling headline. Ryan Hale had released a psychological report. The anchor's words echoed through the quiet cabin. Sources close to the Hale family say this document details Emily Hale's struggle with emotional instability. The screen displayed a stack of papers stamped with a false clinic logo. Bold statements described her as paranoid, easily distressed, and mentally fragile during pregnancy. Emily felt a cold pulse move through her. She knew immediately the file was fabricated. Ryan was building a narrative to protect himself, painting her as a woman capable of harming herself for attention. Before she could process the anger rising inside her, a new segment began. Sierra Quinn appeared on screen with swollen eyes and trembling lips. She filmed herself in a softly lit room, speaking in a cracked voice. Emily was hurting. She blamed herself for everything. "I loved her like a sister, but she would create drama to punish Ryan. She would throw herself into danger." Sierra covered her mouth as if overwhelmed. "I wish we could have saved her." Emily stared in disbelief. Each word felt like a slap. Sierra was not just lying. She was rewriting Emily's pain as manipulation. The betrayal dug deeper than before. Her chest tightened, and she set her cup down with shaking hands. Jack muted the television. "They are panicking," he said calmly. "This is what people do when they know the truth is closing in." But the damage was spreading. Social media clips of Sierra's video multiplied at astonishing speed. Comment sections surged with arguments. Some accused Ryan and Sierra of staging everything. Others claimed Emily had been unstable for months. People argued in the thousands. Opinions clashed so violently that mainstream news stations began covering the divide. The country seemed split down the middle. Emily leaned forward, her hands tangled together. "How can they believe this?" she whispered. "How can people think I did this to myself?" Jack stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. "Because they have only heard one side. Because lies move faster than truth." He stepped toward her and lowered his voice. "But that is about to change." He sat beside her and opened his laptop. "Last night I sent coordinates to a contact of mine. Today we release a different piece of the story." He clicked a file. The screen showed a map with 2 marked points. The GPS data placed Ryan and Sierra at the exact stretch of Red Canyon where Emily had been pushed. "This will force reporters to ask questions," Jack said. An hour later, news outlets began to break the story. New evidence suggests Ryan Hale and Sierra Quinn were present at a restricted trail near the time of the fall. Reporters were no longer speaking softly. They were pressing harder. A segment aired of a journalist asking why Ryan announced a memorial service less than 48 hours after the incident. The headline crawled beneath the screen. "Why the rush to declare her gone?" Emily watched with a mixture of dread and relief. For the first time, other voices were beginning to question the official narrative. Camera crews flocked to Red Canyon. Investigators from independent agencies requested access to the trail. A well-known talk show panel debated the timeline. One host lifted a brow and said, "Who holds a memorial before the body is even recovered?" The audience murmured in concern. Later in the afternoon, new witnesses stepped forward. 3 hikers who had been near the ridge that day reported they saw a woman matching Sierra's description on the trail. One said he heard raised voices. Another said she looked anxious and out of place. Their statements hit the news circuits quickly. By early evening, the tide had shifted. The public was no longer sure who to believe. Ryan attempted another public appearance, but reporters bombarded him with questions he could not easily deflect. "Were you on the trail that day?" Did you mislead police about the timeline? Ryan stuttered through his answers, his composure finally cracking. Emily watched him scramble for control and felt something calm settle inside her. It was a strange sensation, like watching a storm weaken after days of destruction. Jack walked back into the living room carrying 2 cups of herbal tea. He handed one to her and sat down. "You see it now," he said quietly. "The truth does not need noise. It only needs time." Emily took a small sip. Her throat tightened with emotion. "It hurts," she admitted, "seeing them lie so easily, seeing people believe them." "Of course it hurts," Jack replied gently. "But you staying silent now is not weakness. It is strategy. If you speak too soon, they will twist it. If you stay quiet, they lose ground. Silence is our strongest weapon right now." Emily looked down at her hands and then at her stomach. She placed her palm over the small curve of her belly. Her voice was soft, but filled with new resolve. "I will protect my child, no matter what they say, no matter what they do." The fire cracked in the hearth. A soft wind brushed against the window pane. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment and inhaled. She felt stronger than she had the day before. Stronger than when she first woke in the ICU. Something inside her was shifting. It was not rage, but purpose. A purpose she had not known she possessed. Just as she exhaled, a sharp sound cut through the room. Jack's phone buzzed loudly on the table. He reached for it. His eyes narrowed slightly as he read the message. "It is the investigation team," he said. Emily straightened, her pulse lifting. They just found a new video. The fight for the truth had shifted again. Snow fell quietly outside Jack's cabin as the investigation team arrived with a stack of newly recovered material. The air inside had grown tense the moment the first message came through. Emily sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her hands clasped tightly together. She could sense that whatever Jack was about to show her would change everything. He placed his laptop on the table and connected an external drive. The screen brightened. A new video file appeared. "This is from a group of tourists," Jack said softly. "They were hiking on the ridge across from where you fell." He clicked play. The shaky footage opened with a sweeping view of Red Canyon. At first, it was only wind and rocks and faint voices. Then the camera panned. A figure appeared at the edge of the cliff. Emily leaned forward instinctively. Her heart pounded hard enough to make her feel lightheaded. The silhouette on the screen slowly sharpened. A woman stood near the drop, gripping her jacket and looking around nervously. "It's her," Emily whispered. Sierra's outline grew clearer as the camera zoomed accidentally while the tourist adjusted the device. There was no mistaking her. The hair, the posture, the jacket she had worn that day. She stood exactly where Emily had struggled to hold on to her life. Jack paused the video. "There's more." He played the next segment. The camera shook slightly as the tourist tried to focus on something happening to the right. Suddenly, the image sharpened. Ryan stood several feet away, completely still, staring downward. His expression was blank. His arms hung at his sides. He did not call for help. He did not move forward. He did not attempt to reach for anyone. He simply watched. Emily's breath caught. Her hand covered her mouth as she stared at the frozen frame. Ryan's indifference, captured so clearly, pierced her deeper than Sierra's shove. "He watched me," she said. "He watched and did nothing." Jack did not touch her, but his presence felt steady behind her. "This footage confirms everything you remembered," he said, "and it shows the world what he did." He clicked to the next image. A photograph appeared on the screen. Investigators had taken pictures of shoe prints found on a narrow ledge near the fall site. Another image placed Sierra's hiking boots beside the recovered prints. The match was perfect. The tread marks aligned. The pressure points matched a person shifting weight forward. "They found her footprints," Emily said quietly. "Yes," Jack replied. "Right where you felt her push." Another file loaded. This one was a written statement. A man who had been hiking that afternoon had come forward. He reported hearing 2 women arguing moments before the fall. He could not see them clearly, but he remembered a sharp, angry voice saying something about someone being in the way. His statement had been recorded and signed. Emily blinked rapidly. "It must have been us," she whispered. "She was taunting me. She wanted me close to the edge." Jack scrolled again. The next file opened with a screenshot of a message. The sender was Sierra. The recipient was Ryan. The timestamp showed it had been sent 2 hours before the hike. The words were simple and devastating. "Just push her, we'll be free." Emily's entire body went cold. She squeezed her hands together until her fingers hurt. The betrayal she had suspected suddenly became undeniable. Seeing the words on the screen made her stomach twist. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "They planned it. They planned to get rid of me. They didn't want the baby. They wanted freedom from us." Her breaths grew shallow. Jack crouched beside her so she would not face the screen alone. "Emily, I need you to breathe slowly. You are safe. You are not alone. And this is not happening again." Emily nodded through tears. She kept staring at the message. Each letter felt like another strike to her heart. The truth she had feared now had weight, form, and digital proof. Jack closed the message and reached for a folder thick with printed documents. "I have collected every piece of evidence. Photos, statements, data logs, timing records. The entire chain of events is mapped out." He placed the folder on the table. "This goes to the federal court, not the local police. This is attempted murder, and they will not escape it." Emily wiped her cheeks. Her breath steadied. "What happens next?" Jack stood and walked toward the doorway leading to his office. "Your lawyer wants us to prepare for something important. When the time comes, you will need to appear publicly." He turned back toward her. "This is dangerous. Ryan and Sierra have no idea you are alive. That gives us an advantage, but it also means revealing yourself will be a shock to them. We need to plan it carefully." Emily stared out the window. Snow drifted silently beyond the glass. Her hand moved to her stomach, and she felt the familiar flutter beneath her palm. That small movement grounded her. "I will do it," she said. "I don't want to hide forever. I want my child to know I fought for us." Jack nodded slowly. "I knew you would say that." He gathered the printed evidence into several stacks, each labeled and clipped in place. The investigation team helped him sort through digital files. Every document was checked, backed up, and categorized. Emily watched quietly as they worked. Each sheet, each map, each screenshot formed the truth that had been buried by lies. When the final page was added to the collection, Jack placed everything into a solid steel briefcase. The metal shone under the cabin lights. It looked heavy with consequence. Emily felt a strange mix of fear and resolution building inside her. This was the case that would expose everything, the case that could bring justice. Jack lowered the lid of the briefcase. He pressed it down until it locked into place. The sound echoed through the quiet cabin. It was sharp, final, and unmistakable. A single click that felt like a verdict waiting to be spoken. The storm of truth hit Colorado before sunrise. News anchors spoke with urgency, their voices trembling with the weight of what had been revealed. The leaked footage, the incriminating messages, the eyewitness statements, and the undeniable GPS evidence created a wave of outrage that swept from Denver to the smallest mountain towns. Social media feeds flickered with disbelief. Headlines rotated across every screen. "Attempted murder investigation expands. The Hale case turns explosive. Authorities respond to new evidence." Colorado had not seen a scandal this severe in years. Within hours, law enforcement held a press briefing. The chief of police stepped to the podium with a firm expression. Cameras flashed wildly as she announced that arrest warrants had been issued for both Ryan Hale and Sierra Quinn. The words echoed across the state. "Both individuals are considered fugitives at this time. Anyone with information should contact authorities immediately." Her tone left no room for doubt. The chase had begun. Far from Colorado, on a dark highway cutting through the ragged mountains of Utah, a black SUV sped through the night. Snow flurries streaked across the windshield. Ryan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Sierra sat beside him, shaking uncontrollably. Her mascara smeared across her cheeks, and her breath came in shallow bursts. The glow from the dashboard lit her frightened eyes. "She's alive," Sierra whispered. Her voice barely rose above the hum of the engine. "She's alive, isn't she? Tell me the truth." Ryan slammed his palm against the steering wheel. The sound echoed through the small cabin like a gunshot. "She should not be," he shouted. His voice cracked with fury. "She fell. I saw her fall. She should not be alive." Sierra curled away from him, pressing her back against the door. "I told you this would happen," she said through trembling lips. "We should have made sure. We should have looked. We should have—" "Stop talking," Ryan snapped. "Just stop." The SUV pushed deeper into the mountains. The road twisted through pine forests and steep cliffs. Moonlight glinted off frozen streams below. They drove for hours without stopping, desperate to outrun the tightening noose of the investigation. But every mile only carried them further from escape. Sometime near dawn, they pulled into a lonely gas station. A flickering sign cast a pale light over 2 fuel pumps and a dark, empty parking lot. Ryan turned off the engine and inhaled deeply. "We switch plates here," he muttered. "No cameras, no traffic. It's perfect." Sierra swallowed hard. Her hands shook violently as she stepped out of the car. The cold air sliced through her thin jacket. She looked around the empty lot with haunted eyes. "Ryan, someone will find us. They already know everything." "Not if we move fast," Ryan said. He crouched near the back of the car and began unscrewing the license plate with frantic hands. His breath formed white clouds in the freezing air. Sierra leaned against the car, breathing in short bursts. Her voice cracked. "If she's alive, she will tell them everything." Ryan froze. For a moment, he looked like a man cornered by his own choices. Then he shook his head and kept working. "Do not say her name," he hissed. "Do not." Sierra covered her face. The truth was sinking into her bones. Emily was alive, and if Emily spoke, their entire world would collapse. A sudden gust of wind swept across the lot. Sierra shivered again, then frowned as she heard a low rumble. It grew louder. Ryan lifted his head and squinted into the distance. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The noise intensified. It was not wind. It was not an approaching car. It was a helicopter. A spotlight snapped on, flooding the gas station with blinding white light. Sierra screamed and stumbled backward. Ryan dropped the license plate and ran to the driver's door, but several police cruisers screeched into the lot from both sides. Officers jumped out, shouting commands. Bright beams from flashlights and rifles illuminated the scene. "Hands where we can see them," an officer yelled. Ryan froze for a moment, his fight drained by fear. Sierra crumpled to her knees, her hands lifted high. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. "Please," she sobbed. "Please don't shoot. Please, I'm not running." Ryan tried to take one last step toward the SUV, but an officer charged forward and tackled him against the hood of the car. The metal rang loudly as Ryan's chest hit it hard. He grunted in pain, struggling, but 2 more officers pinned him down. Cold steel clamped tightly around his wrists. The handcuffs clicked in place with a finality that shook him to his core. "You have the right to remain silent," an officer recited. Ryan twisted his head to look at Sierra. She was kneeling on the frozen ground with her hands above her head. Tears streamed down her face. Her breath formed uneven clouds. Phones from bystanders lit up in the background as several drivers who had stopped for fuel recorded the arrest. Already, comments were exploding across multiple live streams. "Is that Ryan Hale? She's crying. Look at her. They're taking him away. This is insane." The footage spread instantly. People across Colorado and beyond watched as Ryan Hale and Sierra Quinn were dragged into separate police vehicles. Reporters who happened to be traveling through the area pointed their cameras at the flashing lights and shouted into microphones, broadcasting the scene with breathless urgency. Back in Aspen, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to read the news updates on Jack's laptop. A notification popped up on the corner of the screen. Jack walked in from the living room, holding his phone. He paused. His expression shifted. "It's them," he said quietly. "They're caught." Emily closed her eyes. Her breath trembled. Relief washed through her, mixed with fear, exhaustion, and something she could not yet name. Her hands lifted slowly to her face. A soft sigh escaped her lips. It was the sound of a woman who had survived something unthinkable, now feeling the weight of justice finally beginning to move. She pressed a trembling hand over her heart. The nightmare was not over, but the chase was. The Federal Detention Center in Denver buzzed with restless energy as the sun rose. Officers moved briskly through metal hallways. Doors clanged shut. Phones rang without pause. Since the manhunt ended the previous night, the entire building felt like the epicenter of a storm. Ryan Hale and Sierra Quinn had been brought in just before dawn. Now they sat in separate interrogation rooms, each one pale, shaken, and exhausted. Ryan stared at the table in front of him. his hands cuffed loosely. His clothes were wrinkled from the frantic escape. A camera sat in the corner, recording everything. Across from him, two federal investigators flipped through folders thick with evidence. "Mr. Hale," one of them said, "your story changed 3 times in the last hour. We need the truth." Ryan rubbed his forehead with trembling fingers. "I already told you," he muttered. "It was an accident." The investigator leaned forward. "Then why were you on a restricted trail? Why did you not call for help? And why did you announce a memorial before anybody was recovered?" Ryan's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. He opened his mouth to answer, but the words dissolved into silence. In the room next door, Sierra sat with her arms wrapped around her chest. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. Her mascara was smudged, giving her a haunted appearance. The investigator across from her clicked a pen rhythmically, waiting for her to speak. "Your message to Ryan," he said, sliding a printed copy forward. "We know you sent it. Just push her. We'll be free." Sierra's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head violently. "I didn't mean it," she whispered. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then tell us how you meant it," the investigator replied. But Sierra said nothing. Her silence was an admission in itself. Both interrogations stretched on, tangled in contradictions and unraveling excuses. By noon, the news of their detainment swept across Colorado with incredible speed. Television screens in diners, living rooms, office lobbies, and hospital waiting areas flashed constant updates. Hale and Quinn in federal custody. Sources confirm interrogations underway. Shockwaves through the state. For many older viewers who had been following the case closely, relief mixed with outrage. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. Financial institutions moved even faster than the news cycle. Within 24 hours, the bank accounts linked to Ryan and Sierra were frozen. Businesses associated with Ryan initiated emergency board meetings. By afternoon, reporters confirmed that Ryan had been removed from his role on the board of his real estate corporation. His assets were locked. Calls from disgruntled investors flooded the media. One station displayed a headline that read, "We trusted him, now everything crumbles." At the same hour, far from the turmoil of Denver, a different kind of gathering formed outside Jack's cabin in Aspen. Several news vans parked along the snowy road. Reporters stepped carefully across the icy ground while camera crews set up equipment. Word had leaked that Emily Carter, the woman believed to be dead, was alive and ready to speak. Inside the cabin, Emily stood in front of a mirror. She wore a simple light blue maternity dress that fell gently over her growing stomach. Her hair rested over her shoulders. She looked fragile, yet unbroken. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric of her dress. Jack stood nearby, watching her with steady concern. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. Emily lifted her eyes and met his reflection in the mirror. "Yes, I do," she said. "If I stay silent, they keep control of the story. This is my life, my child's life. I need people to hear what really happened." Jack nodded and offered his arm. She took it, and together they walked to the porch where dozens of reporters waited. Conversations hushed the moment Emily stepped outside. Camera lights clicked on. Microphones lifted. The crisp mountain air wrapped around her, sharp and cold. Emily stood behind a small wooden railing. She took a slow breath and placed her hand over her belly, grounding herself in that familiar rhythm of life beneath her palm. A reporter stepped forward. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "can you tell us what really happened at Red Canyon?" Emily swallowed and faced the crowd. "I was pushed," she said clearly. Her voice shook for a moment, then steadied. "I was pushed off the cliff. I fought to hold on. I begged for help. My husband watched. He did nothing." Gasps rose from several older reporters who had followed the case from the beginning. Emily continued, "They told the world I slipped. They held a memorial while I was fighting for my life. They tried to erase me. They tried to erase my child." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she did not wipe it away. Her voice softened. "I survived because my baby's heartbeat kept me holding on. I survived because I refused to die for a lie." The crowd stood in profound silence. Only the soft hum of cameras continued. One elderly journalist stepped closer, his voice warm and emotional. "Why speak now?" he asked. Emily met his eyes. "Because my child deserves the truth," she said. "Because victims deserve to be heard. Because silence protects the wrong people." Her words resonated deeply. Several people in the crowd lowered their microphones, visibly moved. A few older women wiped tears from their cheeks. Emily's honesty felt raw and unmistakably real. The broadcast aired across the country within minutes. Social media overflowed with messages of support. Viewers commented that Emily spoke with a strength they had not seen in years. Elderly audiences, in particular, praised her courage. Her testimony stirred something powerful. Back in the detention center, Ryan slammed his hand against the interrogation table when he heard the update from a guard. "She spoke publicly," the guard said. "Everyone believes her." Ryan's face drained of color. Sierra, in the next room, covered her ears as if the news were too much to bear. Outside in Aspen, Emily lowered her head and closed her eyes as the reporters stepped back. The truth had entered the world, and nothing would ever be the same. The federal courthouse in Denver stood tall against the gray morning sky, its stone pillars casting long shadows across the crowded steps. People lined up before sunrise, wrapped in coats and scarves. Most of them were older Coloradans who had followed Emily's story with unwavering attention. For months they had watched the headlines unfold. Now they wanted to witness justice with their own eyes. Some held small signs of support, others stood silently with solemn expressions. The air felt heavy with anticipation. Inside the courtroom, the benches filled quickly. Reporters adjusted their equipment. Lawyers shuffled papers. The murmurs of the crowd echoed softly beneath the high ceilings. Then the double doors opened. Emily stepped inside, wearing a simple light blue maternity dress. Her belly was visibly round beneath the fabric. The color of the dress made her look gentle and calm, yet there was unmistakable strength in the way she stood. Jack walked behind her, and her attorney remained at her side. As soon as she entered, the entire hall rose to its feet. The sound of people standing in unison filled the room like a wave of respect. Ryan and Sierra sat at the defense table. Both turned when they heard the movement. Ryan's face drained of color. His mouth fell slightly open. He had not seen Emily since the night of the fall. The sight of her alive shattered whatever confidence he had left. Sierra looked worse. Her hands trembled violently. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. She looked at Emily, as if she were seeing a ghost. Emily kept her gaze forward and took her seat, refusing to let their stares touch her heart. When the judge entered the courtroom, everyone Saturday. The trial began with Emily's lawyer presenting the first piece of evidence. The lights dimmed and a large screen descended above the courtroom. A video flickered to life. It showed the ridge of Red Canyon from across the valley. The footage zoomed in slowly until Sierra's figure was visible at the cliff's edge. The camera shook, but her outline was unmistakable. Several people in the courtroom gasped softly. Next, the video cut to the moment Ryan appeared. He stood several feet away from where Emily had clung for her life. The camera paused on the exact frame that showed him standing perfectly still, watching, doing nothing. His stillness looked chilling under the courtroom lights. The defense shifted uncomfortably. Ryan looked down and clenched his fists. The prosecution called the hikers who had recorded the video. The first witness, a middle-aged woman, spoke in a steady voice. "I heard a scream," she said. "I didn't know what was happening, but it sounded like someone was terrified." Her words carried through the courtroom. A second witness confirmed the same thing, describing the echo of a woman's cry bouncing across the canyon. The next evidence was displayed on a digital screen. GPS data appeared in colored lines that traced the exact movements of Ryan and Sierra on the day of the incident. The prosecution walked the jury through the timeline. The coordinates matched perfectly with the restricted trail from which Emily had fallen. Their claim that they had been nowhere near the site unraveled instantly. Whispers spread through the courtroom. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others covered their mouths in shock. Then the message appeared. The words glowed on the large screen. "Just push her. We'll be free." A visible shudder went through the room. Emily closed her eyes briefly. The message was more painful to see than any video. The jurors stared at it with horrified expressions. Sierra began to cry softly. Her attorney put a hand on her arm, but she pulled away. Ryan tried to remain composed, but the pressure finally broke him. "She sent that!" he shouted suddenly, pointing at Sierra. His voice cracked. "She wanted her gone! She pushed her, not me." The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge banged the gavel repeatedly until order returned. Sierra, shaking violently, glared at Ryan through tears. "You left her there," she cried. "I pushed, but you watched. You didn't save her." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. The judge allowed Emily to speak. She rose slowly, placing one hand on her stomach to steady herself. When she turned to the jury, the entire room seemed to lean closer. "I survived the fall," she said softly. Her voice carried through every corner of the courtroom. "But I won't survive silence." Her words settled like a stone in still water. Even the cameras seemed to pause. A few people in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. When she returned to her seat, the judge instructed the jury to deliberate. They did not take long. A tense hush filled the courtroom as the four persons stood to deliver the verdict. "We, the jury, find the defendants, Ryan Hale and Sierra Quinn, guilty of attempted murder." A collective breath released from the room. But the judge was not finished. She adjusted her glasses, looked directly at the defendants, and spoke the sentence that would define their future. Given the severity of the crime, the clear intent shown in the evidence, and the danger posed to both mother and unborn child, the court sentences each defendant to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. There was no outcry, no protest, only the sound of justice settling into place. Officers approached the defense table. Sierra began sobbing uncontrollably as they lifted her to her feet. Ryan stared straight ahead, expression hollow. When the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he finally looked toward Emily. His eyes burned with a hatred so sharp it seemed to slice through the space between them. The officers pulled him away as the doors opened. The verdict was done. The chains of justice had closed. Soft winter light drifted across the windows of Morrison Lodge as Emily lay in the quiet birthing room, holding her newborn daughter close to her chest. The storm of the trial had passed. The crowds were gone. The danger was gone. Only stillness remained. Her breath trembled as she looked down at the tiny face resting against her skin. The baby's fingers curled around her own with surprising strength. Tears gathered in Emily's eyes. She whispered the name she had carried in her heart for months. "Hope." The nurse smiled and adjusted the blanket around the infant. "It suits her," she said gently. "She looks like a miracle." Emily nodded. The name was not just beautiful. It was truth. This child had survived the fall, the cold nights in a hospital room, the terror and the darkness. She was living proof that Emily's life had not ended on the cliff. It had begun again. Over the next few days, Morrison Lodge became a sanctuary. Fire crackled in the stone fireplaces. Pine trees dusted with snow surrounded the wooden cabins. Emily stayed in the west wing, where warm light filled every room. Letters arrived each morning from across the country. Many were from older Americans who had followed her story closely. They wrote with kindness and gratitude. They told her she was brave. They told her she was seen. They told her that many women her age had lived through similar pain and found strength in her survival. Emily kept every letter. She stored them in a wooden box Jack placed on her nightstand. On quiet nights, she opened the box and reread the messages, letting them remind her that she was not alone, that she did not suffer in silence. That hope had been born into a world that cared. Jack visited often. He always knocked softly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace forming around her. He brought wooden toys he carved by hand, little animals, tiny trees, a rocking horse the size of his palm. Emily watched him place one on the dresser near Hope's crib. His movements were careful and steady, almost reverent. "She will like these when she is older," he said. Emily smiled. "She will love them." Jack nodded but said nothing more. His affection for Hope was obvious, but his tenderness toward Emily was something deeper. He never pressed her for attention. He never asked for anything. He simply appeared with quiet loyalty and left with the same gentleness. The silence between them was warm rather than empty. When spring arrived, Emily began taking morning walks along the trail behind the lodge. She would wrap Hope in a soft blanket and carry her close. The forest smelled of pine and thawing earth. Sunlight filtered through tall trees. Each step reminded Emily that healing did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, like a dawn rising after a long night. Some days tears welled unexpectedly. Other days she laughed out loud when Hope made a tiny sound or squeezed her finger. Both feelings were welcome. Both were signs she was alive. Months passed. The world moved forward. News coverage shifted to other stories. But Emily's name still appeared on posters, websites, and advocacy letters. She had become a symbol without trying to be one. People wrote asking her to speak at events, but she declined. She wanted time. She wanted stillness. Then one morning, 6 months after Hope's birth, Jack entered the lodge with an envelope in his hand. His expression was gentle, but serious. "It came," he said. Emily opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation printed on thick white cardstock. National Domestic Safety Foundation. Annual Fundraising Gala in Denver. Guest of honor, Emily Carter. She stared at the words for a long moment. Denver. The city where she almost died. The city where she was reborn. She felt fear at first, then something stronger, a sense of purpose that warmed her from within. "I will go," she said softly. The night of the event, the grand ballroom in Denver, glittered with soft lights. Hundreds of people, mostly elders, filled the chairs. Some wore pins shaped like small blue ribbons. Others clutched programs with Emily's name printed across the front. The atmosphere hummed with expectation. Emily entered carrying Hope in her arms. The baby wore a tiny white dress. Her eyes were wide and curious. When the crowd realized who had arrived, they rose as one. Applause filled the room. Some people wiped tears from their cheeks. Others pressed hands to their hearts. Emily walked slowly down the aisle, moved beyond words by the warmth pouring toward her. At the podium, she adjusted the microphone. The ballroom fell silent. She looked out at the faces, many lined with age and experience. These were people who understood pain, people who had lost loved ones, people who had overcome storms of their own. Their eyes held encouragement. Emily began to speak. She told them about Red Canyon, about the fear in her chest when she held onto the branch, about the night she woke in the hospital, about Hope's heartbeat that kept her fighting. And then she paused. She lifted Hope gently and held her close. Her voice softened. "Falling didn't end my story. It began it." The room erupted in applause. Some people stood. Others cried openly. Television cameras captured every second, broadcasting the moment live across the country. Older viewers watching at home felt their hearts swell. They knew what it meant to fall. They knew what it meant to rise again. When the ceremony ended, Emily stepped outside into the cool evening air. Cars passed on the distant streets. The sky above Denver shimmered with early stars. Jack walked beside her, carrying a blanket for Hope. He hesitated before speaking. "Emily," he said, "I know you are building a new life. If you would allow it, I would like to be part of it, not just as a friend, as someone who wants to help raise hope, as someone who cares for you both deeply." Emily looked at him for a long moment. There was no fear in her chest, only trust. Trust earned through loyalty, kindness, and quiet strength. She nodded. They returned to Aspen soon after. As the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, the sky glowed in gold and rose-colored light. Emily stood on the lodge balcony holding Hope. Jack stood beside her, silent and steady. The wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. For a moment, the world felt perfectly still. 3 survivors, 3 lives intertwined by fate, 3 hearts learning how to breathe again. Their story of peace had finally begun.